could we go through a really brief round of introductions? And Bertrand, I'll start with you, if that's okay. Bonjour.
Bonjour à tous, Bertrand Pourcelot, so I'm the CEO of Enrich for Service Providers, which is the product and business unit specialized in developing platform and platform as a service solution for telecom operators and MSPs in general, part of the Enrich Group, which is one of the leading European consolidator in UCaaS and smart contact solutions.
Thank you, Bertrand. Akshay?
Hello everyone, Akshay John from Destiny, heading Customer Solutions Architecture, and as Destiny has done for many partners in the room and across the world, I concentrate on solutions architecture.
I realised I did Bertrand in French and then I've gone French the whole way down. Jean, please go ahead.
Bonjour, I'm John Tucker, so I lead the service provider business at Intermedia. It's actually Intermedia's first time here at the Cavell event, so thank you for having us. And so Intermedia, we are a service provider partner delivering a full UCaaS, CCaaS, AI stack, but working very much with an indirect model, partnership model with service providers to own their own brand, build their own product, and take it to market. And that's us.
Thanks, John. Anand?
Hello, everybody. Anand Butch, now with Crescendo for the last several years as the Chief Strategy Officer, was a co-founder with NetSapiens. We have about 230 service providers globally, 5 million plus seats across a variety of theaters, predominantly focused on the SMB. And I guess we'll get into a little bit more detail later.
Thanks, Anand. And last but by no means least, Jed.
Yeah, hi, good morning still. No, it's afternoon. So I'm Jed Pell. I'm here representing Alianza today. You've heard from Brian and Dag around who we are. As you know, recently we acquired the assets from Microsoft on Metaswitch. So, you know, we have, well, I personally now responsible for 200 customers across EMEA and APAC, you know, ranging from mobile, fixed, and everybody else in between.
So what we do ahead of these panels is there's a fair amount of preparation that goes into with these very busy gentlemen, getting them on calls and organising what we're going to talk about. Then I look at the questions in advance, then I completely change my mind about what I wanted the questions to be. And I looked at this morning and I realised I got it in the wrong order. So if we think of communication service providers and telcos, first of all, can we talk about definitions? What are we talking about when we talk about a platform, a communications platform? Jed, if I could come to you first on that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, I was kind of do a politician's thing and go back to your first question. But actually, you know, what is a CSP? What's a service provider? I think for us, you know, it depends where you are from a consumer, and I don't mean necessarily consumers as individuals, but as a consumer as a business. Really, you know, where do you kind of consume your communication services from, and I think there's such a varying range of operators, providers, and CSPs, etc. around. I mean, you know, and everybody has to differentiate, and I think that's the kind of key challenge right now: is how do you differentiate in such a crowded market, but actually provide, you know, real value to your customer base. And I think for me, you know, when we talk about service providers and CSPs, for us, it's those that actually put their brand and value around, you know, actually differentiating and adding value in either verticals or wider consumer elements.
Yeah, Jed, I think that's a really key question. And we've already got into a definitions of what type of, I've tried to get us to define platform. We're already talking about definitions of providers and how that's applicable. So in terms of the platform, actually, from the Destiny perspective, what are you talking about when you're talking about a platform for your partners?
My view of a platform is it's a foundation. It's basically a foundation that in itself will enable a function. But what it allows to deliver is services, value, and add up to the stack. I think we've spoken about multiple things through the day, all kind of keying in towards integration, and we'll speak about that a little bit more in this panel as we progress. But essentially, it's something that delivers a functionality, a service, a delivery that is based on what the business is looking to achieve for their customer segment.
I like that, a nice open definition where we can keep it as broad as possible, and therefore it gives me as many questions as possible across the board. And from the NetSapiens platform's perspective, can you talk us a little bit about how you define it and how you talked about your 230 partners?
Sure. I mean, I think having been in the space for as long as we have, we've, you know, first you talk about the providers that, you know, where they come from, and it's kind of a three-dimensional aspect. You know, you have facilities-based providers, you have facility-less providers, you have folks coming from the IT world the voice world, and some that are regulated, some that are unregulated, and we've been, watching that journey. But from us, more recently now, the simplistic way of looking at the platform is we consider it an operating system, right? Because lots of people talk about the commoditization of UCaaS, if you will. Now you think of CCaaS and CPaaS and so on and so forth. But we look at it as a platform at the core that you can build on, make it extensible, so that people can build and service providers can build services in their own image, if you will.
So it's effectively a sort of modular base, and I think we heard about that in the first platform, the first panel this morning, talking about if it's sort of voice only that you're talking about, maybe that's slightly restricts you. John, from the intermediate perspective, I know vast majority of your business, 9/10, something like that, is indirect through partners. If you could just talk to me about your sort of platform definition.
Yeah. From the beginning, Intermedia, we don't go to market direct. Our brand is not known by our end customers, so everything is through our channel. So for me, a platform starts with being partner-centric. And what I think a lot of the conversation in this topic ends up being around technology. And for us, we bring we have a full stack. We're a large software development organization. But actually, that's like maybe 10% of the total problem space, I think, from a platform, which is where what we're trying to achieve with our partners is to build a great business. We're trying to deliver end customer outcomes. And we're all in this same space. But for us, a platform extends much wider into how do you go to market? How do you train your sales teams? How do you co-sell? How do we go and partner with you in the market? We talk a lot about CX, right? And delivering meaningful business outcomes in terms of customer engagement. I put it to you that actually building and implementing a really effective CX solution for an end customer is extremely complicated. It's not something that you do kind of from a simple playbook. You get given the manual, off you go and do it yourself. It takes real engagement. So from our perspective, the platform extends, yes, the technology stack, but very much wider into the go-to-market, the marketing stack, the sales engagement, the co-selling, the implementation to enable the partner with the building blocks, with the foundations, but actually deliver business success at the end.
Got you. So it's much more business process rather than just the sort of technology platform. Bertrand, from Enreach for service provider perspective?
Yeah, I would totally echo what John just said. I think there is a whole technology stack, which is a very interesting area, especially for the product and technology people in the room. But much more important is the partnership model. What is, have you checked the key alignments in terms of what you want to deliver to the end user and where you want to differentiate as a service provider? Where you are in your own journey and strategy as a service provider. Are you investing only on your OSS, BSS to create differentiation, on automation? Are you a general purpose player? Are you specialized in a vertical sector or a very specific segment? We hear a lot about hyper-verticalization and on some busy word, but actually in the field, what are expecting the end users? Yeah, we heard a lot about problem solving. To solve a problem, you have to understand it, you have to communicate with the customer, and that's taking energy, focus, attention. So to understand that end-to-end is an investment. And I see the relationship with the service provider are really an engagement in the mid-long term, because I think for this engagement to be, I would say, successful and future-proof, you need to share some values and check this, I would say, alignments that really are the key starting point. But maybe a few words on the technology side, because I'm passionate on technology as well. I would see 3 or 4 key building blocks, on which cloud technology, on which infrastructure you want to host your platform. Do you want to have only a SaaS model or a data center hosted model? Which software you're using, whether it's a UCaaS, CCaaS, or enterprise application? How you orchestrate that, OSS, BSS, etc. What type of integration you're looking for. So you have a lot of possible variations, and you have to make choices. I think I heard someone saying this morning, maybe it was Brian, saying you have to make choice, The worst is not making a choice. So let's make a choice together and see where there's a fit. I think that's very key.
Well, Bertrand, you have perfectly segued into my follow-up question, which was going to be, so Dom Black showed us the figures of how many service providers in the room. All of the service providers in this room have already got platforms. They've already got communications platforms. They're already selling those solutions to their customers. What I was keen in as a sort of follow-up, Bertrand, you mentioned choice, and Brian mentioned it this morning. Why make that choice? Why move from the platforms that they're on? And I'm going to come to all the panelists on this as well, but I was keen also for your sort of feedback in the audience as well. So there should be a Slido question that should appear on any of your apps as well, just in terms of why move platforms? Why migrate from your previous platform to a new one? So I was really keen to hear from all of you. You're obviously gathering loads of new service providers, lots of new communications providers onto your platforms. Why are they making that migration? John, I'm going to come to you in the middle just to mix it up on that one.
Sure. So there are two.
I hope I've got the two reasons on the slide, otherwise I've really messed up on the multiple choice.
Look, I think we see two really fundamental dynamics, and they've come up a lot today already. One is we all see this huge shift in expectations from the end customer about what we can deliver for their business, and particularly leveraging AI and the rate of change that we're seeing in expectations from small and medium businesses in particular. That's one reason to shift platform. I don't have a product offering that can compete, and I need to evolve. I think a second big dynamic we see is that, a lot of you know where my background comes from, is that we're really seeing an epoch shift in the vendor landscape to providers. 10 years ago, the expectation was I could go to an equipment manufacturer and I could buy a platform a technology platform, and I could build all of my services from mass market consumer right the way through to SMB to enterprise based on that single platform. Our view is that vendor landscape view has changed. COVID drove the emergence and huge adoption and market dominance in some ways around collaboration and video, right? That single vendor ecosystem environment doesn't work. So we see a lot of service providers coming to us to say, I need to bring an additional platform into my network, to allow me to compete with the technological advance and change and expectations of my businesses. And second, because candidly, my existing vendor, who I looked at to do everything for me, maybe still does a good job for my mass market consumer, but isn't enabling me to offer business services. They're not applying the focus to that domain to equip me to compete.
Got it. Jed, I realise you just put you on the toes there with your mic.
It's okay, no problem. I think it's kind of interesting. I think there's different ways to look at this. Certainly when we take the SMB market in the UK, it's 50% of the GDP of business is driven by SMBs. Now, is the SMB market rife with Teams and UC? No, but all the industry does is talk about that environment. So part of what Brian and Dag were talking about is how do we drive innovation to those mobile users? How do we drive innovation to those flower shops? How do we drive innovation around there? And just simply thinking that we're going to do that by consolidating and driving the cost down is incorrect. I think really it's about how do you build on top of the existing communication methods that run their business, are fundamental to their business, and actually add value to them. And that's why people are moving. I think somebody said it on one of the previous panels, just moving to the cloud for like's sake isn't going to cut it anymore. And I think that the default answer of it's the cloud is the answer is completely irrelevant. I think it's actually what is the value and what are you actually delivering to the end service. That plumber who's underneath fixing a leaky tap, his phone going off. How does he actually answer that call when each call's worth about £400? On average for a call, I think that's really where we have to think about why do we want to move platforms is to actually add value to the end user, not necessarily just to consolidate pure cost, because we can see what happened to Mitel when we're sort of driving cost out of the revenue chain.
And Anand, I wanted to come to you on that, because obviously Jen mentioned the small business sector, which obviously NetSapiens in the States have had incredible traction on. So I was just interested to see, are we sort of aligned with John and Jed on that in terms of relation to customer features and realising customer demands?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just to echo the sentiment, again, one of the things that we saw in the market and continue to kind of build the business on was the continued fragmentation of what the use cases are for the end user. And the more and more drive that you see, even for, just yesterday I was watching the international version of CNBC, and even CNBC is now pushing side hustle classes for people that are creating small businesses, if you will. And if somebody's a flower shop or if somebody's a boutique, we have partners that focus specifically on pest control, for example. And the use cases that are needed for that pushes this notion of hyper-verticalization. And so it is about choice, and it is about that end user choice that allows you to, really build value. So to your point, we see a lot of folks capping and growing, going multi-platform. We have folks that have been with us for many, many years that were greenfield at the time because VoIP and UCaaS was a new venture for them, but now it's very much about finding value for the end user use case so that they can drive better margin and ultimately build a better business depending on the market segments that they're going after, whether it's regional or vertical or so on and so forth.
And I think that's what Matt Townham was referencing this morning in his keynote about the intelligent workplace. It's that capability, the hyper-virtualization piece, able to integrate, many more systems outside of just, what you consider traditional communications or VoIP services. Bertrand, migration to enReach for service providers, what are you seeing as the primary? And some of those rationales in Europe are slightly different to what we see in the States as well, so I was just interested there.
Yes, there are variations according to countries and so on, but maybe just to come back on the value add you can deliver to SMEs. I think a lot of people are talking about SMEs let's see how we can bring some services to the SME. Well, in fact, I think the cloud solution and as a service solution for many years, as a principle, are allowing to deliver to SME and to make available to SME users capabilities that were exclusively accessible to large corporations 10, 15 years ago, if I could say. You take an integrator, you integrate a good IPPBX with a good call center, with a good video collaboration solution, you replace it every 15 years. Okay. With cloud, you can make available similar services to SME with a much, much, much more agile way. But you have to do it in a different way. Because the SMEs, they don't expect a UCaaS plus a CCaaS plus some integration. They want solutions to their problems, which are, I'm very much focused on my external communication, selling and customer service. And to take a few, mobile is one, but and to take a few examples, for example, how I'm adding WhatsApp channel to my customer service in an easy way. And don't come and tell me about a nice CCaaS that I could, I would say, tear down a little bit to solve my problem. No, I just want a WhatsApp channel addition to my stuff. Then, okay, as a company owner, I also want to see what's going on in my enterprise. And for example, I'd like to know whom has called my customer service and hasn't been called back or reached out by anyone from my enterprise. And I don't want an advanced CCaaS solution at €100 a month per position to solve that problem. I just want a nice reporting, across my customer service and my voice solution, to call it simply. That's a second example. Third one, maybe, to be very concrete, the mobile side. Okay, mobile has very much been a silo for many years, even sometimes sold by separate suppliers. And I think with a more network-driven FMC, one of the key benefits is to get the mobile numbers and the mobile code into your enterprise solution for CRM integration, for tracking, for reporting. Then, again, as a company owner, I know what's going on, and not to blame any salesperson that's very active placing mobile calls, but I want to know what's going on. I want to know, if they are very active and is it efficient and integrated with my solution. So that's, I think, 3 examples of how SME consume this type of services in a very different way, not using the categories that were defined earlier for large companies.
And I think all the panelists so far, and actually I'm going to cause you a slight problem in a minute, are saying roughly the same thing, that it's generally a feature function requirement or meeting of whatever segment of the market that be that tends to be the primary driver for the service provider to move platforms so that they can. Actually, would you like to, the audience came there with consolidating sort of underlying costs. Would you like to agree with your panelists or agree with the audience? Entirely, up to you in terms of what are the sort of primary reasons for migrating? Are we talking about consolidating or are we talking about feature function?
So
it's really cruel of me.
No, that's fine. That's fine. In the drive for customer acquisition, what we've observed is across the various service providers, I'll use the analogy of the spaghetti that's used for code and that's used for networking. That's kind of what's happened with platforms as well. So in the drive for customer acquisition, we've ended up with a spaghetti of platforms, and that creates a problem.
Yeah.
Because what's not easy to sell, what's not easy to grow, is very easy. It's very difficult to try and have customers retained on. So we've shifted now to customer retention. So the need for consolidation actually is, I mean, the cost is an element that comes in over there, but it's more about how exactly can we consolidate and have something that we can easily sell, easily integrate, and easily go out and not just retain our current customers, but also acquire new ones with. So I think the drive comes in from multiple facets, and again, I think it's connecting with the customer journey, solving the customer's problem, making sure that we can have integration capabilities so that we can get best of breed to bolt on and be able to offer as a differentiated service instead of just having a mishmash of things that were born out of good intentions to try and accelerate, get into market quicker, but then now are becoming more limitants in terms of how quickly we can innovate or grow out and grow.
I think that's a really key point. A lot of providers, it isn't intentional. It can be through merger and acquisition and expansion. You end up with, and we speak to providers at Cavell that are running 20 plus different communication platforms, which I think we'll all probably agree in a sort of ideal world is probably not great. So we've talked about what a platform is, why providers migrate. I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of the how now in terms of, and actually I wanted to come straight back to you on that in terms of migration. The migration piece can be a real challenge if I'm a service provider, I'm a small service provider, I'm running 5 communications platforms, I'm managing, a few thousand users. If I'm looking at consolidating across platforms, how can you, from a sort of Destiny perspective, assist with that? Because it's quite a challenge, isn't it, for the service provider in terms of migrating to a new platform?
Migration, if you look at it, is broken up into 2 pieces, my view. One is basically what the vendor can enable in terms of the journey itself, and second, how do you manage that journey? Because again, from a user point of view, you need minimal disruption, and you need to make sure that they are not losing out, they're not going to something less than what they had. And from a service provider point of view, it's the same thing that's happening. So I think Destiny works quite closely in understanding, again, first we identify the use cases, we identify the user journeys, we identify, and that's right from purchase all the way through support, all the way through even offboarding and adding on new services, bolting on new functionality. And I think we try and map that out in a sense that the journey is owned by the service provider and enabled through the elements that Destiny provides. So I think integration is again key in terms of how exactly we can, so because migration can be from on-prem to cloud. Migration can be a consolidation of multiple technologies and bringing it all into one stack. Migration can be many, many different things, but I think it's important that you try and keep integration again at the key of it, at the center of it, because how can you choose a platform that integrates into something and at the same time enables integration into it? And I think that's what will make the migration journey the easiest, and that's kind of how we focus on things, to try and not rip and replace, but rather have a path that will be least disruptive, both for the service provider as well as for the end customer.
And ultimately, that's what the service provider wants. They don't want, there's an inherent risk with platform migration that you're going to churn customers. And we were talking about the sort of migration journey outside. What from the sort of NetSapiens approach, how do you, if you're coming to a service provider who's got multiple platforms, they want to consolidate on NetSapiens, what are you talking to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tool set and a professional services exercise, because at the end of the day, the nomenclature from one platform to another platform may not be the same. Right? Even though the feature set might be similar, the construct within the platform might be different. So we have a wide set of tools that actually do that level of migration from a variety of different platforms that exist. And then, quite frankly, it's the diligence associated with the pre-sales process and then the post-sales process to say, okay, what are those tools that are available to actually do the migration, because the heavy lifting is in terms of the data content and the functionality from user to user, to move a set of functionality from one end user from one platform where the use case might be just ever so slightly different to a new one. So it's quite frankly a lot of difficult work, but then a lot of automation that we've already built.
Yeah, I know you've put a lot of focus into it, and the industry have put a lot of focus into it generally for migration tools and things to try and automate. Bertrand, I wanted to come to you, because in Reach for Service Provider, you've done a fair amount of consolidation from the Reach side. So from the service provider side as well, what do you talk about that migration consolidation journey?
Well, maybe first, service provider usually hate migrations. Because in fact, at the end of the day, it's more work for probably similar revenues, correct?
Or potentially less revenue in some.
Yeah, well, even worse. So there must be a big driver. And usually the big driver is that the partnership model doesn't work anymore. Whether it is the pricing model, whether it is from one-off, for example, to a recurring model. We saw a few things like that. Or moving to full cloud model. And I think it's more and more important with the latest geopolitical evolutions. Data privacy is really back on the central stage. And with AI, it's going to become even more important. So I think this topic might be back in a more central way. So I think it's very important to understand that the service provider is doing that because the partnership model doesn't work, or it's not future-proof. He thinks that it can't bring the integration. It cannot take him to the next phase on his journey, whether it is on his own BSS evolution or specialization in a vertical and so on. So usually migration are considered in a phased way. First is newbies on my new solution, for example. Then, for example, migration when re-engaging with the customers to make sure that I'm either upselling or taking something out of it. And then finally, more volume migration because the savings are already at the end when you stop the platform, which usually sometimes never happens. How many providers we know, they have 10,000 users left somewhere, well, we don't touch it, nobody knows really what's going on. I'm a bit negative here, sorry for service providers who would recognize themselves, and I understand the reason. So I think the real life is, okay, have a stepped approach, and then of course, as a solution provider, as a platform vendor, we need to provide the right tools. And I would say the one who migrated the most easily are the ones who have the good orchestration, OSS, BSS, which plug to the API to automate provisioning and so on. And I remember some years ago talking to one of our largest customers, Eliza in Finland, who has several hundreds of thousand end users. And I told them, well, you're a mobile operator, yes, but you're also an ISP, you're the incumbent in the country. Why aren't you deploying more IP devices and the converged solutions? And they said, well, first is because we are a mobile-first country, home of historically Nokia. But above all, have you ever tried to activate 10 or 15,000 end users in a weekend with IP stuff? When you just activate, SIM cards in backend systems and so on, yeah, that's doable. So, and that's what they are doing. So I kept that in my mind. Yeah, one of the drivers is not about the technology, am I selling equipment, whatever, is how I'm able to deploy that in volume. And I think that's back maybe to the future of platforms. I think there are still a lot of options we can see here, and others exist, but the number of scalable and future-proof platforms and organization maybe is narrowing. That's, I think, a key point.
Well, I wanted to come on to the platform option, but I think Bertrand raises some really key points there. And going back to that sort of first question, sort of the challenge is you have to create the incentivization and the tools in terms of why doing it. John, do you come across that from an intermediate perspective in terms of you having to overcome? As Bertrand said, we get anonymized data from a lot of service providers, and as you said, there'll be there's 15,000 users stuck on this platform. They're on a recurring model. Why would we risk that? Is that overcoming those challenges a sort of key part of the migration process?
Yeah, 100%. Right. We often talk about migration with respect to the tooling, the services we can provide as a wrap around those tools to affect the data migration and the transition of a customer from A to B. And I like where you're going, Patrick, because for us, this starts with what's the end customer trying to achieve, and indeed, what's the value proposition from us as the provider to the customer, and how are we delivering on it. I start here because at the end of the day, service providers, our engagement with our customers, we've been talking Cavell at these events for years and years and years about delivering, understanding the end customer's requirements, really delivering great business outcomes for them. And there's a promise we're making essentially to the business, which is, look, I'm going to help you do the tasks involved in succeeding in your work. I'm going to help you do them better. I'm going to help you engage with the customers better. I'm going to help you manage your partners and your suppliers better. I'm going to help you collaborate inside the business better. These are business outcomes we're promising and we're selling to the end customer. And for us, a migration from a platform to another one starts from, how do I, as the service provider, how do I deliver on that promise? Well, I can no longer deliver on that promise of the productivity benefits, the customer support and customer outcome benefits with my current platform. So I need to replace the platform to achieve that. But I now have to frame and communicate the reasons for this change in terms of the benefits to the end customer. So it all has, for our view, it has to start there. And to actually now tackle your question, Patrick, is, yeah, we get a lot of pushback to say, hey, you know what? Yes, I need a new platform for my net new customers. Why should I swing all my existing base over? Why should I go through all that disruption? And it is impactful. It takes a lot of effort. And so it comes down to drawing out those pathways that demonstrate from the service provider how do they continue to earn the business from their customers by continuing to evolve and iterate and delivering on the latest business problems that they have. And just very last quick thought is, if they do that right, it means that, yes, we can often look at it as a platform swap out as a churn risk, right? You know, if I do a big and heavy swap out a platform, maybe I lose 20% of my customers, might be what I might expect as a service provider, right? However, if I go from a platform which is failing to meet the requirements of my end customers, my churn rate is going to be high. Maybe it's 10, 15, 20% a year churn away from me to someone else who can meet the need. And if instead what I do is I deliver on the promise of I, the service provider, or you, the service provider, you are the trusted partner for the long term for that business, then actually you can transform that from being a negative churn risk to actually a positive customer retention, a brand positive reputation.
Yeah, if you can add value-added service, if you can add loads of things you weren't selling before, it goes from a sort of risk to an opportunity on that side. Jet, can you grab the mic? We've got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to come to you on migration, but I also wanted to give you the sort of first word. So we talked about what a platform is from a service provider perspective, why you would migrate, how you would migrate, some of the issues associated with that, and then what you migrate to. We talked about the platform. So Jet, I wanted to come to you first, without obviously completely advocating Alianza. If you're a service provider in the audience and you're thinking about consolidating platforms, what you're doing in terms of migration, what are your sort of key considerations for service providers? I know you speak to them on a sort of daily basis in terms of when they're selecting their next communications platform. I'm going to come to all of you on that before the end. But Jed, if I can start.
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to quickly touch on the migrations are hard. And that's why there's a lot of old platforms still out there. And there will continue to be out there. So whatever we say about the technology, that's damn hard to kind of move users. You've got to use them for a compelling reason. And really the same thing around platform selection. You know, our first meeting in Mobile World Congress, 8:30 a.m. on a Monday morning, a very large Nordic operator came to us. First thing they did, and didn't even introduce themselves, said, we are mandated by our governments to have our own cloud. The geopolitical environments that we live in today require me to build my own cloud. We are now looking at how we can do that, how we can migrate into our own cloud. We are the provider, we are the deliverer of the service. And that was a compelling reason for them. And they're actually being paid by their governments to do that. So that's the migration kind of key thing. So their reason for choosing a platform is, can you host it in my environment?
And I think that only has been heightened, the research we've done this year, by the geopolitical uncertainty that's going on at the moment in terms of redundancy options and data sovereignty and where you want your data. So I think that's only been heightened.
Yeah, and that was just one, bordering Russia. There's other countries that we all know that are kind of, having that strategic problem as well as actually going, well, hold on, what's happening over in the US with the environment there? Are you going to repatriate my data at some point in time? I want my data I want my services in my own cloud. And my own cloud, again, there's another discussion. You know, is it when we talk about cloud, is it cloudification? Is it true Kubernetes? Is it really truly, you know, down into a microservices environment? Then we kind of get into the technical things, and I'll kind of bring some of the whizzes in.
We'll have to have an entirely different panel.
Yeah, but I think there's so many different kind of reasons as to, you know, the platform selection from an underlying operational environment. Then secondly, it's okay, how can I build on top of that? What additional services? How do you give me a gateway to, you know, these new voice AI services? So I think there's so many different, you know, versions and reasons to do that. You know, is it mobile where, you know, am I still keeping an IMS core? Am I moving away from my IMS network? How do I actually build around that? So I think there's so many different ways we can kind of cut this cake. I think it's kind of fascinating. I don't think we're really there. I don't think there's one size fits all. All I can say is over the last 5 to 7 years, the industry was all about cloud. I would argue it's not necessarily all about public cloud. I think it's all about how do we provide cloudification for people that fit their needs.
Right. So I want to come to all of you just for your key. No, it's absolutely fine. For your key top tips for service providers exploring different platform options. Anand, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, I think the things to consider, probably kind of distill it down to your deployment model and flexibility in deployment model with respect to how you want to deploy based on what the needs are, just like what Jed was speaking to. So what your choice is on deployment model. The other thing is commercial model. What kind of flexibility do you have from a commercial model standpoint to meet the margin needs that you have for your business, depending on the types of end users that you're going after? Not every end user is the same. Not the usage of every end user is the same. So commercial model is the second one. And then the last couple, scalability, which is, I think, a given in terms of what you can accomplish. And then lastly, the extensibility from an API perspective. Do you have the ability to build on top of the platform? Do you see things out of the box that you can use day one, but then you can also turn around and build on an API to extend the platform out to the universe of applications that you want to try to build towards?
Thanks, Anand. John, top tips?
I echo a lot of that. I guess
It's
three.
harder as you go down the line as the answer.
Three things. Does the platform deliver product capabilities that enable you to win? 2, does the platform provider, you're selecting a platform, you're also selecting a partner. So does that partner organization, are they invested in directly your success as the service provider? Is that their sole go-to-market motion, or do they also go direct, and maybe partnership indirect is a sideshow? Are they focused on your success, and do they equip you to deliver on it? And third thought would be, we've got to look a little bit down the road, right? Anyone who suggests we know what the future is going to be, the next 5 years is probably going to be more different than anything we've seen over the last 2 decades. So we don't know exactly what's going to come. So again, partner selection, thinking there about, is this partner someone who's engaged with what's coming next? Do they have the resources? Are they growing? Are they thriving? That means they're then able to execute on building for what's coming next.
Yeah, I think partner focus is a. I would have liked to come back to that. Maybe we did an entirely separate panel on that. Akshay, top tips for providers. I realise they're running.
No, I think everything Anand said and John said, but also own the brand, because I mean the platforms could change, but the brand remains yours. Own the customer and the customer journey, and own the future. And what I mean by that is, elaborating on what you said, is it future-proof? And can you then bolt on, and do you have a platform that can integrate into, and has things that can integrate into it easily enough?
Yeah, I think that integration has been a key piece of focus on. Bertrand, finally, top tip for service. If you've got any left, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think let's be careful with the top tips. We don't read into crystal balls. But I think that for the service provider, very key is to very well define his own strategy, in terms of go-to-market, direct, indirect, general purpose versus specialist, where he's investing and when he wants to differentiate and create value in the future, starting now, but for the next, let's say, 3-5 years. Based on this, he can select the right partnership model, which includes the technology bit. And we talked about the data control, the privacy. I think that's a very important one. Mobile, the world is going mobile, so are you ready for this evolution? Mobile convergence, but also mobile first usage, and as a driver for innovation. And I think it's very, very key to select partners who also have, I would say, open and interoperability-driven approach, because I think that's what drives, I would say, innovation through best-of-breed ecosystems. The lock-ins, sometimes you look for a one-stop shop, it looks easy, but there's all the lock-ins coming, in terms of equipments, reusing other equipments, the market is not full of greenfields, less and less, so I think there are a lot of dimensions to take into account, but above all, the partnership model, the philosophy, the values. Do you have shared values with your partner?
Great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a massive round of applause for all of my panelists. Bertrand Porcelet from the Service Providers.